brief introduction while everyone's coming into the room. My name is Michelle Arkusky. I'm the executive director for She Is the Music. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to the women on this conversation for joining us today. If you've been a She Is the Music member, welcome. If you're new, welcome. And thank you for tuning in to our third Music Business Basics section. We have some incredible events and opportunities coming up this year, so please keep your eyes on your email. And if you haven't already done so, please create a profile on our database at sheisthemusic.org. I'm so excited for our speakers today. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Susan Dotis, our co-chair of Global Mentorship, who is also a former major label executive and music publisher professor of music business studies at NYU's Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. Those of you who have joined us before for Music Business Basics know my face. I'm happy to have you all back. And welcome to, as they say on CNN, our members from the United States and around the world to tonight's event. I'm very excited to have you. I am just quickly here to promo our Music Business Basics program. As some of you know who've joined before, this is really She Is the Music Mentorship's attempt to really inform our membership and others about the basics of the fundamental areas of the music business. So many of us who work in the music business, either just starting out or have been around for a while, need to keep up on the changing dynamics that happen in the major areas of the music business, and we're here to provide that in a straightforward, basic way. Some of you may know we started out our program talking about sync. We had a fantastic radio promotion event about a month ago, and tonight we really have an exceptional presentation tonight about marketing, both domestic and international, which is so critical in today's global music business. Our next event hopefully will be scheduled for February 25th, and I'm particularly really interested in this because it's for songwriters or people who work with songwriters. We are going to be discussing the basics of copyright. How do you actually even copyright your song? And then discussing the Music Modernization Act, the new sweeping piece of legislation that addresses how songwriters get paid. What is the mechanism? How are you going to do that? So that'll be February 25th. Finally, I just want to announce that the Music Business Basics program is hopefully going to become a YouTube channel where you can see all of our presentations, and it's structured almost like a course. So being the professor that I am, I love it when people get to look at something from an entire trajectory. So to be like taking a business structure of the music industry course. So that's going to be up soon. Our wonderful program director, Michelle, is working on it. So once again, thanks for joining. I am excited for this panel because, the baseline in the music industry is marketing, and we have three great people here tonight to talk about it from a variety of perspectives. So I want to throw it over to my wonderful colleague and friend, Sarah Bromley, who is going to be our host for tonight. She's a member of our squad on the mentorship team, which is great. She's a graduate of the University of Miami. She is also one of the co-chairs of the New York City chapter of She Is the Music, and she's been one of the key contributors to our summer mentorship program. She's a marketing executive with tons of experience. She will talk about that. So Sarah, throwing it over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to read from where everybody's from. We have like a worldwide squad tuned in right now, so that's really cool. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to talk about this because as professionals who've been in the music industry for several years, we don't really get to talk about the basics that much. You just get caught up in your everyday. So we're really excited to share with you guys and looking forward to seeing what you guys think. So when we were talking about this basics course for marketing, I had recently read about one of our panelists, Britney Davis, in Billboard's 40 Under 40, and I just thought her role was so cool and a perfect representation of sort of the direction that I really feel marketing is going in the music industry. And so just to introduce our two panelists. So as I mentioned, Britney is at Capitol Records as the VP of Artist Relations, Marketing, and Special Projects. She has played an integral role in some of the industry's biggest successes of 2020, and has also emerged as a strong voice for change within the music industry. So she has led the marketing and artist development for Lil Baby since he signed to Motown. His 2020 album, My Turn, had huge success, debuted at #1, and was the highest streaming and selling album across any genre in 2020, which is amazing. I'll let Britney talk about how she got into the industry, but she has also worked with artists like Migos, City Girls, Queen Naija, the Queen and Slim soundtrack. And then in addition to being honored on Billboard's 40 Under 40, she was also on the Hip Hop Players list, Variety's Women of Impact, and a leading voice on both Universal Music Group's Task Force for Meaningful Change and Capitol Music Group's Task Force for Diversity and Inclusion. Our second panelist, her and I go way back, my friend Jenna Novak, and we actually started out in the industry together as college reps. So really excited to have her join here, and we can get into that a little bit later. But Jenna is the Senior Director of International Marketing at RCA Records, with over 10 years of experience. Since joining RCA, she has been a key player in developing Khalid, Grammy-nominated artists since his inception, and as well as artists like SZA, Her, Childish Gambino, Bryson Tiller, Normani, Wizkid, and A$AP Rocky, building global campaigns across all of their marketing strategies. Obviously, a great roster there, and being involved with garnering #1 album debuts, multiple award show nominations at the Brit Awards and MTV EMAs, as well as sold out arena tours worldwide. And I'll let Jenna talk a little bit about how she got into the industry as well. But I think that's how we'll start off. So Britney, starting with you, why don't you describe a little bit about your background and how you got into the music industry?
Sure. And Sarah, when you reached out, I was so excited to participate because I remember looking at panels when I was in college, or just even still, just knowing how important these opportunities are. So I'm super appreciative that you guys considered me. So, long story short of how I got here, originally from Oakland, California, I grew up in a house of music. Music was always being played. I was saving my allowance to go to Tower Records or Rasputin, a local retail chain, and just buying CDs. And my mom really liked concerts, so she would take me when I was old enough to go. I think my first concert was Janet Jackson, I think. And I would go and listen and sing along, realizing I can't sing. But part of it was, how does this all happen? When you see the performer on stage, like, who's making all of these things happen? Like, the performer is dancing, but where are the lights and this video? Who are the people that make this happen? I think that sparked my curiosity early on, in just how, like, the people behind the scenes, even reading credits in the CD booklets when they used to have them, like, who was responsible for doing what, just always intrigued me. And then when I went to Howard University, I was a part of an entertainment club, and we did a lot of concerts, panels, meet and greets, and I planned homecoming concerts. So always involved in the music scene, kind of wherever I was. And one of the panels that I put together had Tina Davis, who ended up becoming one of my mentors, and we ultimately worked together for several years. And also Rob Light, who is a partner at CAA and the head of music. And I remember approaching him like, I want an internship. How do I make it happen? And he was like, well, talk to this guy. And I was like, okay. So I talked to him. He was like, you can have an internship. We love what you're doing, but you have to come to LA for the summer. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. I don't know anyone really in LA, but it's close enough to home. I'll make it work. So before my senior year, I interned. It was in the mail room, sorting out mail, but really going around to people's desks and finding out what they did. And I was like, oh, music agent is part of like what the concert thing is. Okay. I think I want to be a music agent. After college, I worked at an agency, and I went back to CAA, and they didn't have any openings in the music department. So I was in the lifestyle marketing. And I was like, lifestyle marketing, it's cool, but I really want to be in music, not realizing how it'll all come full circle. But after that, like at night, I was still interning with Tina, who I had formed a relationship with, and going to the studio. She managed Chris Brown at the time. And so I would go to the studio and like type lyrics and figure out credits and just really want to be involved in like, how does this all work? And one day, Tina and Chris were like, we need you to work with us full time. Like, can you leave that other job and come here? And I did, and that transcended into being part of his management team and helping him build his record label, signing artists, managers, writers, producer. And then in 2017, I wanted to make another change and go inside of a record label. And I've been at CMG since 2018. Actually, my 3-year anniversary was last week. So that's the long story short. But it definitely was a grind and a hustle. And I think it was important that all those different moments, not knowing that they would all kind of lead us to itself and make me a better, well-rounded executive.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jenna, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, thanks for having me here too. And I was also really thankful to be a part of the She is a Music mentorship program this summer. That was a great opportunity. So, I got my start in the industry as an intern. I, was fortunate to have a family friend kind of open that door for me, and kind of the same thing as Britney. I was eager to see what he was doing. I was like, when it's time for me to have an internship, like, you got to hook me up. So I got my foot in the door at Columbia Records. And really just those first couple of years trying to figure out, the art of hustle and learning and establishing relationships with people. So, after my internship, really great timing. There was an opportunity to be a college rep in New Jersey, which is where I met Sarah. So we were college reps my last year at Rutgers. I was a senior. And then, once I graduated, still trying to figure out how I get back into the industry and just really keeping in contact with anybody I had met, probably bothering them too much just to see any roles. Eventually they gave me a temp job at Columbia, and it was my first opportunity to be in the building regularly. So I knew from that point on, like, I'm going to be working here. So I took that temp job. I eventually found, a full-time position working at Columbia. At the time, I was an admin assistant working on the marketing team, and I was actually working with Sarah. And this was at the time of teen boy bands, pop bands. We were trying to get in the marketing mind of 13-year-old girls, working with Nickelodeon and One Direction, who at the time was the biggest boy band in the world. So really being able to do such large scale marketing campaigns. I mean, we took over Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida with One Direction. So really the only things that you can do when you work with some of the biggest boy bands in the world. And then, being at Columbia for a couple of years, I was in digital marketing. I was a product manager. I really wanted to get into the hip hop and R&B space. I was such a fan of that music, and I felt like now that I understood marketing from a business standpoint, I wanted to get involved in artists that I was super passionate about. So this job with International came about, and I obviously wasn't super experienced in international, but it was working with Chris Brown and Bryson Tiller and A$AP Rocky. And I was like, oh, and you get to travel around the world? Sign me up. That was kind of all I needed to know. And for the past 5 years, I've been working at RCA, obviously a lot of the hip hop R&B stuff. And it's, seeing how the genre has taken over the US and really taken over the whole world. It's been such an exciting time to be a part of these artist campaigns. I've been working with Khalid since we signed him. So really taking him from a developing artist, and some of the things that I learned as a product manager on the US side and applying them to the international side. Taking him to, global superstars. So being able to be a part of that. And it's just been a super rewarding experience, obviously working with artists that you're a fan of on the day-to-day, but that's my story.
Yes, so I think it's important to note, we all sort of have different upbringings, as you will, within the industry. So I started, as I mentioned, as a college rep at University of Miami, and that was kind of my first look into, I didn't know that I wanted to be in music, but I sort of fell off the path that I thought I wanted to go on, and University of Miami had an on-campus record label. And so I knew that I wanted to be in the arts. I wanted to be in something creative. And so I jumped into that. By way of that, I found my way towards a college rep position. And then through that, I found my way at Columbia. As Jenna mentioned, we worked there together. I was there for 7 years, and then I knew that I wanted something different. I wanted something a little bit more independent and entrepreneurial. So I left to freelance for a little while on the marketing side and work with developing artists. And then that's how I found my way to the role that I have today, which is head of marketing and creative at Kin Entertainment, which is a joint venture with Live Nation. And that was actually started by someone who I worked with over the years at Columbia, who was part of Finding One Direction and part of some of these bigger projects, and he left to start his own company. So it just goes to show you, like, these are the different types of journeys that you can find yourself in, and there's no sort of one way to get to one point. You know, I think that's all interesting. We all have different backgrounds, and you know, eventually you kind of find your way through. So thank you both for that. So just to begin, we just want to kind of set the stage. This is all going to be, you know, the basics, and we want to take you guys through sort of just, you know, how things work really at an elementary level. So first off, I guess just to set the stage, what is marketing, right? I think it's a term you hear about a lot, especially in the digital space and with social media, but really it's a very broad term when it comes down to it. It's like the process of taking a product or service to the marketplace, which is like incredibly broad, and it relates a lot to, I think, the way that you'll hear us talking about marketing and product management, in just that it is a very broad role. You handle a lot, and it kind of depends on the artist and the project, but it is a broad term. So that's generally speaking what we mean when we talk about marketing. And then within the music industry itself, and within marketing departments of record labels, there is this term called product manager, which isn't a very common thing to call a marketing manager. It's used in tech more so commonly, but I think if you're not in the music industry and you hear product manager, you're like, what is that? So we just wanted to kick things off by establishing what that is, and you know, get into it from there. So first off, what is a product manager, and what are your main responsibilities as a product manager? Jenna, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, I think a product manager is kind of hard to define in one way. I mean, we wear so many hats depending on the day and the responsibilities at hand. You know, I think breaking it down, like, your first step is always to establish a relationship with your artist and with your manager. That is, you know, you need to understand their process. You need to understand their vision, because your responsibility is going to be creating a narrative from their vision, from their craft. And then you create a marketing plan and a narrative by, you know, going to the various departments across your label. So you're working with your public to figure out, how do we translate this from a press perspective? What are the right outlets to target, the right appearances to target? From a fan perspective, how are we communicating this online? So you're working with your digital product manager to come up with a strategy for social media. You know, you're working with a sales team to figure out, where does this music fit on a playlisting standpoint? Creatively, you're coming up with the photography, the visuals to kind of express this narrative. You know, you're working with the artist to figure out their goals and achievements, really depending where they are in their artist career. You know, sometimes you're working with a brand new artist and you're really having to develop their artist proposition. So on a day-to-day, you know, you're working with all the various departments. You are the team captain. You are making sure that everybody is on the same page, that is on the timeline, that they're sticking to deadlines, most importantly. Because things change, you know, as the day goes on. And most importantly, sticking to the budget, because if, you know, we're not sticking to the budget, we're not making any money and we don't have jobs. So, you know, in the simplest words, that I think is a problem.
I think you touched on a really key thing that I want to emphasize is it's marketing is really storytelling for the artist, you know, based off of the creative and the music. Britney, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, the simplest way for me to describe a product manager is we're the in-house manager for the artist, right? So we are, like Jenna said, the captain, and all the departments are different kind of puzzle pieces, and the product manager's job is kind of to bring those puzzle pieces together and make sure that it's complete. And then additionally, you know, figuring out, working with the artists and who they are, what they have to offer, and why should people care? And you use the different departments to kind of figure all of those things out.
Right. We were saying when we were preparing for this that it's really like a catch-all role. It's just defaults to the product manager if no one knows where else to go. So
yeah, we're blamed. Exactly.
So I think we touched on this a little bit, but this is kind of a good segue, and just in the sense of how marketing departments are structured within a record label and how they work with other departments. I know, Jenna, you touched on that, and Brittany as well, on how you work with these other departments. But Brittany, do you want to explain kind of how your marketing department is set up, just so from like a role perspective, just to give them an idea?
Yeah, so I think when you first come into a marketing department or team, you would, depending on the level, straight out of college, usually is like a marketing assistant, and then you grow into a coordinator, and from a coordinator, and as you grow, you get more and more responsibilities. So coordinator, you're helping the product managers, you're helping them with the timelines, the one sheets, and really being a support for your assigned product manager. And then you grow into a manager level where you're taking on a project, still having the support of, like, more senior people of the team, but really starting to get ownership of the project. And then from there you grow into a director, and then a senior director, VP, and then on and on up.
They like to give you a lot of different rings to
Right.
climb on the ladder.
Senior director, like you go, so it just senior manager, senior coordinator, but in those buckets.
Jenna, do you want to talk about how your international team is kind of structured? Because I know it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, so to start, all the product managers are really assigned their own roster. And we have a digital marketing product manager, we have a salesperson, all focused on international. I mean, we're dealing with the whole rest of the world, so it's definitely a lot of work. But we have marketing managers that are also working on these artists in every single country around the world. So I have a counterpart working with me on Khalid in the UK and in Canada and in Australia, and we're all kind of developing the story for the artist, really tailored to that demographic. I mean, what works in one country doesn't necessarily work in another, but I mean, the idea is that, we're all kind of specialized in working that artist or that genre around the world.
Mm-hmm. And then for my department, it's a much smaller scale. So where our total company is 12 people. So I have a team, and on my team is a fan engagement community manager or fan community manager. I have someone who just does content. So his job is just to edit, shoot photos and video. And then I have 2 product managers. So it can change obviously with the scale of the company, and kind of where you're at in the industry, but this kind of gives you an overall idea of how that entry level process might work, if that's what you're exploring.
And I think, when on the management side, I was still doing like product management and marketing even from there in the early artist development side. So a lot of times, like, indie labels or managers now are acting in roles of marketing as well. So that's why I think that it's not one path to get to a marketing role, because I was still doing marketing even when I wasn't at a major label.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as a manager, it's very similar. It's just across all the different areas of the career outside of music specifically, So I think one of the other questions we have is how the product manager role has evolved in recent years. Obviously, the music industry is always shifting in terms of trends and platforms, and the biggest change in the last decade is the shift to streaming. So I think like my role, Brittany, your role are good examples of kind of the direction that it's going, and of these sort of hybrid types of roles. So Brittany, do you want to speak on that for a second?
Yeah, I think, marketing is something that changes with the time, and as people's behavior and patterns change with listening to music and how they consume it, you have to kind of evolve your strategy to fit that. And my role in terms of marketing is, and there's an artist relations component to my role, and that's because we really have to figure out the artist's DNA and first understand them on a human level. And before we try to build them into a brand, it's like, what makes them tick? what are some things that they love, because you're trying to pull out information to ultimately craft like a story that you want people to connect to. And so the artist relations part of that is really being able to speak that artist language, which is crucial in marketing, period. The acting as a bridge between that and the label, especially coming from a role that was so artist facing in management, you deal with them on so many levels. So to be the bridge between a label and an artist and understanding what each goal and objective is, and then kind of being a translator of that. And then, but additionally to that, I still do traditional product management for certain artists, like you said, Little Baby or City Girls. And with that, you know, it changes by the project. It changes with time. Even it's changed even since, you know, we've been at home during COVID, and really even transitioning more into our strategy being content focused or heavily switching to digital now because everyone's consuming stuff on their phones or on the internet. So I think it's about just being in tune with the times. Like I always say, like, you know, back in the day, you would write letters and put them in the mail, right? But now you have email. So if you're still writing letters in the mail, then you have not transitioned into current time. I think that's the problem with marketing. You have to stay current to what's happening to best service like the artists and their teams.
I think it's so much more content focused now too, obviously with the age of digital marketing. You know, back in the day, you may have done, as a product manager, you maybe have done an artwork photo shoot and a music video shoot. Now it's like, we got to do the whole social media plan. We got to do all the content. You got to do, you know, so, I mean, Jenna, you were in that social media role really when it was exploding and the transition over to Instagram was happening.
Yeah, I mean, when I working with One Direction, I would tweet something and it would be a worldwide trending topic in like 2 minutes. So having that kind of power at such a young age in my career, probably not the best, but it was a great experience. But yeah, just to even add about the evolution of the role, you know, I think even from a global perspective, you know, records get released instantly around the world at the same time. I think, you know, early on, international was kind of an afterthought or a second thought. And I think now, smart managers and artists really realize that the business is global and financially global. And, you know, with social media, artists are seeing their fans in the Philippines and Australia, South Africa. They know that they have an audience out there. So it's really important for them and important for our business to not just be thinking about the US strategy from the onset. You know, from very early developing, we need to be thinking about a global strategy. And even how, you know, playlists and streaming that really contributes to your story. You don't have a global charting record without international kind of adding to that consumption. So yeah, I think the role has definitely evolved and definitely in this space too, where we are all virtual. And it's kind of allowed us to connect with people in this space too. I mean, artists are doing interviews without having to travel around the world. They could just do Zooms. So in a way, it's kind of made the world a little bit more accessible because we're all home and we're all kind of on the computer. So it's interesting.
And I think one thing too, just to add that I think I hear a lot of feedback from some of the junior staff is that when they get product managed, when they apply for marketing jobs, right? Because sometimes PM is used synonymously with marketing manager. They don't realize just how process oriented it is and how much of it is there's a heavy administrative side to what we do, right? And the organizational side on top of the creative storytelling. Like you said earlier, we're doing the timelines, we're doing the budgets. It's a lot of those things where you kind of have to be left brain, right brain, and be able to be ambidextrous and go back and forth. And I think that sometimes they get in this role, they're like, well, we thought that we were going to be just coming up with photo shoots and like creative ideas all day and not processing invoices and trying to figure out where to find money. And I'm like, it's all of it. So we got to get all of it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Very left brain, right brain. You have to think creatively, but commercially, because at the end of the day, it's a business, you know, and you're trying to market the music. You're trying to get people to stream and buy the music. So that's the end goal. There's other types of end goals as well, but that's the main one. And I think to touch on what you were just saying, Brittany, too, in terms of this, one thing that we mentioned earlier that someone had asked about is a one sheet. So that's one of the like process things that Brittany mentioned is important to note about product management. A one sheet is basically just like a one pager about the artist and the highlights that you want to communicate to someone. So if you're sending it off to a press partner or someone at Spotify or Apple Music, you want them to take a look at that and be able to get an instant sort of feeling and information on the artist and what that project is about for them. So just to clarify, that's what a one sheet is.
Yeah, the 101s of marketing, the assets, like photo, bio. To this day, like that's the stuff that we need around the world to tell your story. You need to get that right from the beginning. And I think a lot of times people are so focused on going to the next thing that they don't have their assets together. So when you hear assets, it's photos, bios, one sheet, video. We need all of that stuff to market properly.
Yeah, a one sheet is not the same thing as an EPK. An EPK is more like a press kit, which I guess would be a little bit more involved. Someone was asking in the chat. I mean, you can call them several different things. There's also the sizzle reel, which everybody loves. It's like a video montage.
There's sheet, there's scissor reel, there's highlight.
I love it all.
However you present the information that can give whoever's receiving it a snapshot of your artist and what's going on.
Yes, that's very meaningful. And that is the first thing that someone will ask you when you are a product manager. So have it ready. So I guess to talk a little bit about, obviously we had mentioned that the role is very digital based, but there still is a digital marketing department. So those two things are not the same. So if we want to kind of talk about digital marketing a little bit, and then we can get into some of the other specific departments. But I guess, Jenna, do you just want to touch on the difference between a digital marketer and a product manager?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think on the day-to-day, digital marketing is really focused on setting up the advertising campaign, the social media content. Sometimes artists are really great at their socials. They know their voice online and how to communicate with their audience. Sometimes they don't. And I think that that's where the digital product manager is really the expert of the online audience. I like to work hand in hand with the digital marketing manager because I think in this time, so much of what we're doing is on social media. I think a lot of the immediate fan reaction comes from socials, and sometimes the fans will tell you the single before, statistics or radio will tell you. So their job is super important. And I think another part of it is the digital partner side. So working with YouTube and setting up premieres for your music video, working with partners like Genius. A lot of the content, performance content that you're seeing online, that's being pitched through your digital marketing product manager. And they're also data driven and stat driven, and they're looking at the demographics. They're looking at your age range for a song and consumption. They're looking at how quickly this single is moving or this video is performing versus another single. So, their job is really insightful and helpful to the campaign. But I would say that they're marketing people in their right as well. Like, you need to kind of have a strategy for digital marketing. It's not just run a Facebook ad. It needs to be super tailored and intentional. So I think, in talking about evolution, I think product managing and digital marketing work really closely together.
Yes, right. And Brittany, do you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I think that, the product manager is kind of one of the parents of the project, and the digital person, I would say, is like the sibling, or I talk to my digital leads on the projects all day. We're texting, they're in group text with the artists, they're sending them things and best practices, and really finding ways to build that online fan ecosystem. And doubling down on now, it's really big on influencer strategy. Like, what is that? And how are you tapping into people who have their own online fan base, and how we can bring their fans over into our world? And now you see TikTok, and people are coming up with all different TikTok strategies. So it's really, it's so intertwined that sometimes they overlap, and some people are now doing hybrid positions. But I think that the key distinction with product manager and digital is super focused on the technology online. Marketing still covers other areas. The traditional product manager, like, we're still covering things that are off platform. So photo shoots with publicity or live performances. We're still liaising with radio. So we're still over it. And then I think digital is a piece of that overall puzzle.
Right. I love too how you kind of paint this picture of a family tree. So do you want to talk a little bit about how the A&R person fits into that?
Our lovely A&Rs. The A&R marketing are the parents of the project. And, sometimes we all love each other, and then we have our domestic, disagreements. But I think that we're so in the trenches of it because it comes down to artist development. So The A&R is someone who's finding the talent, bringing them in. They're the ones who sign the artists with that vision that they have in mind, but then we are coming in and amplifying it for the world, right? So we have to be eye to eye in what we are presenting to the world and what the vision is. So I spend a lot of time, the most successful campaigns I've done, lockstep with the A&R. I'm going to the studio to kind of listen to music early to see where the artist is when they're creating, like what they want to present, how they want it to be received. And I think as early as you can be in that process, I think the easier it is for you to be able to come up with ideas and strategies to amplify it. But A&R and marketing, like they're the parents.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, A&R stands for Artist and Repertoire. And we'll probably do a separate basics on that, so we're not going to get into it here.
I would also add that even on the international side, I'm working in lockstep with the A&R too, because I think so much of the music helps work in certain countries. So if I can get the A&R to get me a remix with a UK producer, that's something that I can help work in that market. So it is really important to have that relationship with the A&R and be as close to the music as possible. And like Brittany said, I think that that informs your marketing decisions. I think so much of when you're rolling out a project, people want to understand what was that process like? How did certain collaborations come together? How did music come together? So while the A&R is in the studio and working on clearances and production, they're in that world, you're thinking in a marketing and a press strategy, like how are we telling this story now when we're trying to release the project? So
yes.
And even in the building, you know, I think we always talk about outward facing and we're trying to get people to become fans, and then fans ultimately are customers, but there's still some campaigning and championing you have to do with these artists even into the building. And so I think the A&R and the marketing people are the ones that are going in the building and getting the building excited and to rally behind the product or the project or the artist and their vision. So you guys have to kind of be each other's teammates and co-captains and be like, we need you to get behind this artist. This artist is the next best thing. We need everyone to come together and make this artist huge. And we're the ones who are constantly reminding people like we have to make sure this artist is big as they can be.
There's marketing to consumers, but there's also marketing to your internal teams at the label, because that is a lot of the job as well. Yeah. So I know we're already running a little short on time. We want to get to some of your guys' questions. So just to touch on basically the timing of a marketing rollout and like what is the first step in when you're approaching a marketing rollout and planning that for an artist, what is the first step in that process? Brittany, do you want to sort of speak to the domestic side, and then Jenna, you can talk about international?
Yeah, I think the first step, it starts in the studio with the A&R, right? You're listening to the music, you're living with the music, you're seeing if there's certain lyrics that speak to you or certain angles that you can go with the storytelling. What's the vibe? What does the artist want to present? And then, you know, you're establishing what is the goal of the release, because you need to define that early on so that you can see and have measurable marks of success. Is it to have this big radio single? Is it to grow their Spotify followers by a certain percent? Is it to have them be introduced into a different audience that they haven't really tapped into before? So those are all the things you're kind of discussing beforehand, and then you're making actionable items and goals to be able to measure those things as you roll out the project. So those are the first things I start with, and then you plug in from each department and have them bring their expertise and lens to what you're trying to accomplish.
yeah, and on the international side, so much of what I do is taking that narrative and taking everything that what Brittany is speaking about on the US side and kind of putting that in a nice, pretty package with our one sheet and our assets and sharing that with all of our markets around the world. You know, a lot of, you know, speaking to pitching internally, we're having to do that in all of these markets. If you're a US artist, you may not have that same story or traction in some of these other international markets. So it's really my job to make that digestible and easy for our partners around the world to then go to their sales teams or go to their press partners and be able to talk about that artist in this campaign and why they should care and why they should feature it. So that's really the first step, is like a lot of the pitching process and getting that narrative together and getting that why you should care, you know, in a marketing package.
And we keep saying assets, and just to break down kind of assets include like you're getting your photos ready because you know you're going to need new images for the artist, and you know that Apple, Spotify, YouTube, they all would love their own kind of image to serve on their platform. So you're getting those, you're getting content. Like before you release a song, ideally you'd want to have shot the video so that you can either release it on the same day or at least have it ready. So when you want to release it, you're having the bio, you're having artists do drops, which are saying like, hi, this is Migos and you're listening to us on Spotify, or hi, you're listening to us on Power 105. So you want to get all of those things together as much as possible before the release. So then you're just going and you have everything kind of as you need.
Right. So I think what might be helpful too in explaining this is just giving a specific example of an artist. So Britney, do you want to maybe touch on Lil Baby for that album, for example, like how you sort of, like when did you guys start to prepare for that album rollout, and how did that actually sort of, actualize itself in real life when that was happening?
So with Lil Baby, he released 3 projects in 2018, and then he didn't release any of his own projects in 2019, but he was heavy on features. So we knew that with Baby, like there was this point where people knew his songs, but we really needed people to know him as an artist and who he was, what he stood for, because they would know his name but couldn't put his face with his name, or they would know the song and they'd be like, oh, when they hear it, they'd be like, oh, okay, that's him, or is it Da Baby or Little Baby? And so a lot of our thoughts heavy on the mind was, how do we get people to know who he is, but still keeping the essence of who he is? Because we know that he's not going to do everything, but how can we keep it authentic and true to him and still increase his profile? So we know he doesn't really like to do interviews, but how can we still get people to understand who he is? So it's like documentaries or content pieces and thinking outside the box and things like that. So it's not like you're sitting down with someone and feeling like you're being interrogated, but people are still learning more about your background and where you come from. So content was a huge thing for us. And then it was the digital strategy in terms of increasing like his online visibility. But again, that was key things that we had, because it starts with the music, and Baby has always had the music, so that's that makes it so much easier, right, when the artist has hit records. But then having those measurable goals of, we want his Spotify number to increase by this, we want his Instagram followers to be able to go to this, his YouTube subscribers, and outlining those early on. We want him to have more profiles in publications, so we action item all those. And he released the first single from My Turn, I want to say October 2019, I think somewhere around there. And then we released 2 singles going into the album. But by the time we released the album, we had so much content shot, we had so many videos. And from there, it was just kind of, again, chipping away every week at, what is our goal? How are we getting closer to it? What do we need to do? Is something not working? Tweaking it and keep going. It's kind of just consistency and repetition.
Definitely being fluid is very important. Like you could have one plan one week, you got to totally shift it the following week. That happens all the time.
Or you could think the idea is amazing, and then the artist hates it, and you're like, but I spent so much time on this.
Totally.
Like they hate it. Like, okay.
That's why you got to put your ego aside too, because at the end of the day, it's always about, it's a lot about what the artist feels is authentic to them. Jenna, I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of what you're in the middle of right now with the SZA campaign and how that kind of came about. And I think it's also, we should also kind of talk about TikTok, because obviously that is like one of the biggest booms in the music industry this year. And that I know has a lot to do with the SZA story and kind of how that got fully off the ground. So do you want to touch on that for a second?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously she put out her first song in quite a bit with Hit Different back in September. And she teased a record, which we hadn't even had out yet, which is a big no-no in the industry in terms of like, Spotify doesn't like when records aren't available. It's more so the consumer experience. If music is online, you will be able to stream it. So anyway, she teased that song in that music video early. And I think that record kind of took a life of its own. A lot of people made that snippet on YouTube and just loop because they just love that song so much. And it meant a lot to her, and she released it on Christmas. It was a special day for her. It was her grandma's birthday, and she put that out. And honestly, credit to her, because she is one of those artists that really knows her fan base. She knows how to communicate with her fans. I feel like if you're in SZA's world, you feel like you know her, you feel like you're her friend. And I feel like she does feel like her fans are her friends and communicates with them in that way. And I feel like the record really took on a life of its own on TikTok. And, she's having her first big global record right now. It's number 7 on the global Spotify chart. And, my team and I were talking about, like, when was the last time, like, for a true R&B artist, like not a pop R&B artist, like when have we seen chart? And I think for her, it's really opening up doors for other artists, other artists that we able, like, show that R&B is now in the same space and conversation as pop records, and even as big rap records. So it's truly a milestone for her. And yeah, press outlets in the UK called her a TikTok star. I'm like, she's a Grammy nominated artist, but if you want to call her a TikTok star because that's what's taking off right now, sure. But she has another record that's not out yet that's going off on TikTok. And I mean, even for me, it's like being able to kind of learn this stuff in real time and see how things are trending and seeing how this platform is really taking around the world. It's like you see the streaming numbers in Germany, for example, are super, super young. And that's not coming from listing necessarily, that's coming from TikTok. So it's like we're learning stuff in real time that can apply to her larger artist story. Obviously, as we build into her next release, we're setting the stage for this awareness campaign for her globally, and hopefully that pays the dividends in terms of her next album release. So it's a really exciting space to be in, and like I said, I think opening up doors for the genre around the world. So
yeah, and I think it goes to show that with the story and with a core fan base there, that can sometimes take a life of its own and go off organically. And then our job as marketers is to amplify that even further, right? I think it's also would be important to touch on the huge story that had the whole music industry spinning this past week with the Olivia Rodrigo song, which was another kind of example of how a narrative really pushes, a song through. Obviously, she had kind of the perfect storm of an amazing song, amazing visuals. She had this whole story that her fans really drove through TikTok. You go on TikTok and you were just watching clips of fans explaining the relationship and who she wrote the song about. And so people were just so interested in hearing that, and that paired with, I'm sure their team spent months setting her up, as an artist to partners and really getting that story going. Cause there's a lot of work that goes into, 3 to 6 months ahead of a release like that and building that artist story to the industry. But that's another example of how TikTok just really took that through, to another level. Broke a ton.
Yeah, I think we're not manufacturing this stuff on the label side. I think that's important to understand. It's like you can really try to create this kind of momentum, but a lot of stuff, it's organic. And I think that's where the artist comes into play. And I think them really understanding their own audience. And our job is to amplify that. Our job is, if this record is taking off on TikTok and on socials, how do we translate that to radio? How do we translate that to streaming? How do we fill in the gaps of places where the artist is not able to reach themselves? And I think applying that learning with all artists, I think some people may be press darlings. So how do we take that narrative and bring that to the streaming space? How do we bring that online? So much of what we're doing is really amplifying what the artist already has going on. And what Britney said, if your artist is making hit records, I mean, that's the easy part, like it makes our job a lot easier if you got hit records. So
yeah. So I know that there were a lot of questions about just how to get started if you don't have a fan base. How do you kind of make yourself known? How do you get that going? And obviously, as we just touched on, TikTok is a massive tool, and also the way that the algorithm works on that platform, really anyone has a chance to just blow up overnight. I'm working on an artist since last February, and we launched the girl group. So we just launched their socials fresh. And within the first 2 weeks, we had one of their posts go viral. And within a month, we had 300,000 followers, and it's obviously you have a team of experts behind them, so it's easier said than done. But if you as an artist, or if you as a marketing person who's just starting out and you guys are working on, getting your story out there, TikTok is an amazing tool. Social media is an amazing tool to tell your story, what it makes you unique, what's authentic to you. And that's a good place to get started.
But I think that that's super important to just talk about is like what's authentic to you and the artist, right? Because if TikTok is not your thing, then I don't think then you shouldn't try to force it, right? Because people can see that it's not authentic. I think you have to own whatever it is you're most comfortable with. I have some artists who don't love Instagram, but they love Twitter. Okay, well then own Twitter, own that space, own Tumblr, own, but you know, you have to utilize them and see, or at least know what's going on and how they can help. But I think it's important to make sure that it's authentic to who you are, who the artist is, to tell their story. And there's different ways you can do that. I think you can try to help artists become more and more comfortable, but I don't think you can ever force it.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. If something feels forced, especially fans these days, they can kind of smell the bullshit from anywhere, you know, and it'll be a turnoff. So it's a really, really good point. And I think that sort of touches on one of the questions that was asked about advice on, you know, being on social media while not getting overwhelmed by it. And I think that was a perfect way to answer that question. So I'm just going to get into some of the audience questions in these last few minutes as well. One of them was, what advice can you offer to someone who's already in the industry but is struggling to advance beyond the coordinator role? And I think this is an important one to address because I think in our experience, I don't know if it was the same for you, Brittany, but I know Jenna and I struggled with this a little bit. That is actually like the hardest role to get past, is that coordinator level. Because once you push past that, you know, you're then a manager or you're a head and you're just sort of, I don't know, you have a little bit more independence. You know what you're talking about, or I mean, you know what you're talking about before you get promoted. You kind of have to do the job that you're getting promoted into before you get promoted. But do you guys want to add to that?
I think that what you said is crucial. You have to act in the job that you want, right? So you have to be acting ahead and leaning forward. And I think if you're a coordinator or assistant and you're providing support for a product manager, what are ways that you can make their job easier? What are some ways that you can support them? Or are you coming up with ideas that you can bring to them and to show them that you're taking the initiative and that you actually have a vested interest in this project or artist that we're working with as well? Because I don't think any of us will turn down a dope idea, and that can come from anywhere, right? And a lot of times the assistants and coordinators are the same age as the artist. So I want to know kind of what you guys think is going to be cool or work, because we're marketing to you. So I think it's super important just to be involved and to speak up in those moments.
Yeah, exactly. Good points. One of the other questions is, what are steps that college students interested in working in the music business and marketing can take right now to get experience and make connections? One thing I always say to this question is start local, start where you are, you know, whether that be your campus or a local artist or a venue, you know, start with what music scene is directly around you, tap into that. So that's always my sort of short answer to that question.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I also think creating a network with people your own age, I think is super, super valuable and important. And I think now with the connectivity of online, you know, you can kind of reach out to people your own age that maybe aren't in your own area and kind of get involved in what they're doing. And I think to Sarah's point, like understanding music from a local standpoint or from kind of a person's onset into their musical career, you know, I think you can kind of understand the 101s of marketing, you know, from a hands-on perspective and really build that network. I think is super, super important early on.
And using social media as the tool that it is. So if you like an artist and you are interested in marketing, like I remember that even when I worked with Chris Brown or even up to Little Baby, like fans would generate a lot of things in their local communities and we would see it and we would actually tap into them to participate in the campaign. And even now there's a guy on our digital team who in the Little Baby campaign, I would see him doing like different posters and activations, and he was coming up with little videos. And I'm like, who is this? We need to hire him to do it. And we ended up hiring him in the campaign. And then that transitioned into him having now a full-time job with the company. But he was already kind of doing it And I think as long as you're consistent with it, someone will take notice. At this point, people are tagging us and stuff all day. So I think you can still, the internet has provided an opportunity that I don't even think, I definitely didn't have when I started.
Yeah, a lot of super fans of artists end up getting hired on marketing teams. That is a very key thing to keep in mind. One of them is on my team. She was a super fan for one guy, and she like stalked my boss, and that's how she got hired.
Do not stalk.
Wouldn't necessarily suggest that, but
No.
yeah, she's fantastic, and she's, you know, great with fan engagement because she was a fan. You know, she was that super fan that we're marketing to. So to that point as well. Let's see here. I know we only have 2 minutes, so we'll do one more question. Let's see. Okay, should an artist have a music video prepared before release of a song to ensure full push in today's market?
Yes. Answer. Let's say yes.
Yes, content is
Yeah.
so important. If you're gonna invest money in anything, invest it in great content. I think.
Yeah, and I don't even think it needs to be super. So I was gonna say, I don't think it needs to be super expensive. You know, I think about Pop Smoke literally shooting videos in the streets of Brooklyn, and that is what made hit records. And I think now you need to be looking at music videos as your overall content plan. Like you can chop up that music video for Instagram, for TikTok, for all of your social platforms. So it really is worth the value. And I think the value is the intention that you put behind it, not necessarily the budget that you put behind it, you know. But I think and YouTube is a super big platform for consumption. So I think just having something on YouTube is super important for discovery.
And you don't have to release it right when the song comes out, but you should have it ready to go, because the process to create videos, sometimes it takes a while and you don't want to be behind the records movement and feeling like you're catching up.
Yeah, different artists have different strategies, whether they release it day and date with the song or if they window it. Different strategies work differently for different artists, but you just kind of find your way, what works for you. So we're right on the dot at 7. I know we didn't get to answer everyone's questions, but thank you all so much for tuning in. Obviously, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatnot, and you know, send us your questions. If we weren't able to answer, we'll try to get to them. But also a reminder that the next basics event is Thursday, February 25th. If you weren't on in the beginning to hear Susan. So stay tuned, follow She Is the Music on Instagram, and sign up via the newsletter and all that good marketing stuff that She Is the Music is doing. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Hope there was something.
Bye. See you.
Yeah.